Marco appears to be the perfect husband and father, meticulously attentive to his wife, Eliza, and their young daughter. By day, he runs a successful workshop, known for his craftsmanship and dedication, respected by neighbors and clients alike. Eliza, a talented and compassionate detective, is devoted to her family and takes pride in her work as a protector of the community. However, Marco's perfection is only a carefully constructed mask hiding a dark past he has spent years concealing. He operates in constant vigilance, aware that any small mistake could expose his true identity and his traumatic origins. Marco's past as the son of a notorious killer haunts him, and though he strives to suppress it, flashes of suppressed memories begin creeping into his daily life, threatening his carefully maintained facade. As Eliza begins working on a new homicide case, she discusses her day with Marco, unaware of the tension simmering beneath his composed exterior. The case involves a murder eerily reminiscent of Marco's past, sending him into an internal panic as he realizes that this might not be a mere coincidence. At night, while Eliza sleeps, Marco revisits his hidden trauma, reliving flashes of his twisted childhood and the violence that marked his upbringing. Eliza grows more invested in the murder case, determined to seek justice for the victims. Her dedication to her job is unwavering, and she begins researching the victim's history, hoping to uncover connections that could lead to the killer. However, the more she digs, the more unsettling the parallels become with Marco's mysterious past. She finds herself drawn to tiny details that somehow feel oddly familiar, yet she cannot quite place why. Meanwhile, Marco's composed facade begins to show signs of cracking. He becomes increasingly withdrawn, haunted by memories of his father and a violent past he's desperately tried to forget. Despite his love for Eliza, Marco starts questioning whether he is deserving of the life he's built with her. The guilt of deceiving his wife weighs heavily on him, and he worries that his dark past might endanger the family he cherishes. One evening, Eliza notices Marco's distant behavior and confronts him about it, but Marco brushes it off, masking his anxiety with a forced smile. However, her instincts as a detective kick in, and a small seed of doubt is planted in her mind. Though she tries to brush it aside, she cannot shake the feeling that there's something Marco isn't telling her. As Eliza digs deeper into the case, she begins to unearth details that link the murder victim to a series of unsolved killings from years ago. The profile she builds of the suspect is chillingly close to Marco's past, though she remains unaware of this connection. Her intuition tells her she's on the verge of a breakthrough, but she hesitates, knowing that such revelations often come with heavy consequences. In a quiet, tense moment, Marco receives an unexpected visitor from his past, a man who recognizes him and knows the truth about his identity. The man warns Marco that the past he has buried may be rising to the surface, urging him to leave the city to avoid discovery. Marco, terrified of losing the life he has built with Eliza and their daughter, confronts the man, trying to intimidate him into silence. Eliza, who is working late on her case, happens to pass by and sees Marco with the man. Though she's unable to hear their conversation, she is struck by Marco's intense expression, one she has never seen before. The encounter leaves her unsettled and more determined to uncover the truth, but she chooses to keep her observations to herself for now, hoping that her suspicions are unfounded. The strain of hiding his identity and the confrontation with his past begins to take a toll on Marco, and his paranoia intensifies. He becomes more withdrawn, increasingly afraid that his world is crumbling around him. Despite his efforts to remain composed, Eliza notices the shift in his behavior, sensing the growing tension between them. Her suspicions deepen as she reflects on his strange encounter with the man, wondering if Marco might be hiding more than she had ever imagined. Meanwhile, as Eliza continues to investigate the case, she finds new clues that disturbingly point to someone with a profile that fits her husband's background. Her heart races as she reviews files on past crimes connected to the current investigation. Though she tells herself it's just a coincidence, her professional instincts won't allow her to ignore the facts. She begins piecing together details, her mind unwillingly aligning them with her own life, making her increasingly uneasy. At home, the once warm atmosphere between them becomes strained. Eliza's trust in Marco wavers, but she holds back from questioning him directly, fearing the answer. Marco, sensing her suspicion, feels cornered, yet he desperately clings to his role as the loving husband. He begins to realize that Eliza's investigation might soon bring her to the truth he has hidden for years, and the weight of that realization pushes him closer to a breaking point. The tension between Marco and Eliza grows as they both tread cautiously around each other, with hidden secrets and mounting suspicions creating an invisible chasm. Eliza continues her work on the case, determined to solve it. However, her dedication leads her deeper into the web of unsolved cases and uncharted darkness, connecting more dots that seem to hint at a violent past linked to someone who bears an eerie resemblance to Marco. At home, Marco senses Eliza's unease and realizes that her investigation is gradually closing in on his carefully buried past. He becomes increasingly paranoid, with each of Eliza's probing questions and lingering looks feeling like a threat to his precarious life. Marco's paranoia is compounded by haunting dreams of his father and memories of the heinous crimes he once witnessed. These memories start affecting his behavior, leading him to withdraw further and act unpredictably around Eliza. One night, Eliza notices Marco gazing blankly at a photo of their family, his expression unreadable yet shadowed by a distant darkness. She wants to ask him what's troubling him, but a chilling instinct holds her back, fearful that the truth may be too unbearable to confront. Instead, she quietly observes Marco, analyzing every small detail, every gesture that could confirm or dispel her growing fears. As Eliza continues to investigate, she stumbles upon a disturbing piece of evidence that brings her closer to the truth. The recent murder has elements that connect to a series of unsolved crimes from over a decade ago. The deeper she dives, the more she uncovers a string of grisly details that all share a common signature, one that mirrors the crimes Marco's father committed. Meanwhile, Marco feels cornered and haunted by memories that he's tried to suppress. He finds himself returning to his old habits, engaging in minor, almost imperceptible acts that reveal his darker nature, such as obsessively cleaning tools in his workshop late at night, muttering to himself as if trying to regain control over the darkness that lurks within him. These actions, though seemingly small, point to the simmering rage he has tried to keep contained for years. Eliza begins comparing the evidence she's found with Marco's background, feeling a wave of guilt as her mind draws connections that she doesn't want to believe. She finds herself torn between her love for her husband and her instincts as a detective. This internal conflict takes a toll on her mental state, and she starts experiencing sleepless nights, unable to shake the sense of impending doom that seems to hover over her family. Determined to get to the bottom of the case, Eliza turns to records that have been long archived, brushing off dust-laden files that have barely seen the light of day. In one of these files, she stumbles upon something alarming. A photo of Marco as a child, standing beside his father, the notorious criminal whose violent legacy still casts a shadow. Her blood runs cold as she stares at the image, unable to reconcile the innocent, wide-eyed boy with the calculated adult Marco has become. Eliza's mind races with questions, doubts, and dread. She realizes that she knows very little about Marco's past, a realization that gnaws at her. Unable to contain her fears any longer, she confronts Marco, subtly at first, questioning him about his childhood. Marco, sensing her suspicion, attempts to divert her questions, his evasive answers only fueling her doubts. That night, Eliza wrestles with her conscience. Her love for Marco urges her to ignore the evidence piling up, but her duty as a detective compels her to continue investigating. The mental strain begins to show, and Marco notices, feeling a pang of guilt as he watches her struggle, yet he is too afraid to reveal the truth. In a rare, vulnerable moment, he questions if his past will forever prevent him from finding peace and happiness with his family. Eliza faces an agonizing choice: confront Marco directly or pursue her investigation in secret. She chooses the latter, hoping that if she's wrong, she can spare their family the fallout. Eliza begins to dig even deeper, secretly investigating Marco's past. She travels to the town where Marco grew up, hoping to gather information that could either confirm or dispel her suspicions. Upon arrival, Eliza uncovers chilling stories about Marco's father and the legacy of fear he left behind. She meets people who still remember Marco's father's crimes, individuals who paint a picture of Marco's childhood filled with violence and instability. As she listens to these accounts, Eliza's heart breaks, realizing that Marco endured unspeakable trauma as a child. This revelation fills her with compassion, but it also heightens her dread. What if Marco inherited more than just memories from his father's violent past? Meanwhile, back at home, Marco senses that Eliza is growing distant. Fearing that she might be getting too close to the truth, he becomes desperate to protect the life he's built. Marco contemplates leaving everything behind, taking their daughter, and disappearing to prevent Eliza from uncovering his secrets. However, he knows that such an act would only confirm Eliza's suspicions, solidifying the divide between them. In a desperate attempt to maintain control, Marco confronts Eliza upon her return, demanding to know where she's been. Their conversation escalates into an intense exchange, with Eliza voicing her doubts for the first time. Marco denies everything, but Eliza's relentless questioning finally forces him to show a side of himself he has long kept hidden. Though he manages to calm himself, the tension between them leaves an irreparable crack in their relationship, setting the stage for an inevitable confrontation with the truth. Eliza wrestles with the revelations she has uncovered so far about Marco's past. Despite her inner turmoil, she tries to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the sake of their family. However, Marco senses her unease and realizes that his darkest fears are coming true. Eliza's investigation is closing in on him. Eliza's work grows more intense as she uncovers old witness statements and police reports about Marco's father's crimes, all of which speak to a level of cruelty and depravity that makes her shudder. But she also finds evidence of how Marco, as a child, was often seen in his father's shadow, forced to endure things no child should witness. This deepens her empathy for Marco, yet her suspicions continue to gnaw at her. Can love truly conquer the shadow of such a dark legacy? One night, as Marco sleeps, Eliza quietly observes him, looking for signs, something that could either affirm or quell her fears. She thinks back to the Tinder, carrying moments they've shared, and wonders if those memories are real, or if she's blinded herself to his darker side. The doubt begins to erode her heart, making her wonder if she ever truly knew him at all. As Eliza continues to investigate, Marco becomes increasingly paranoid. He feels her scrutinizing gaze, her pointed questions, and her withdrawn demeanor, all of which amplify his own internal dread. Marco finds himself haunted by nightmares, memories of his father's violent acts that he's tried so hard to suppress. These memories creep into his waking hours, causing him to act erratically. One afternoon, while working on a family project, Marco loses his temper over a minor mishap, and Eliza catches a glimpse of a side of him she's never seen before. Cold, detached, and eerily calm in a way that unsettles her deeply. The moment is brief, and Marco quickly apologizes, but the image lingers in her mind, fueling her suspicions. That evening, Eliza decides to secretly follow Marco to his workshop, suspecting that he might be hiding something there. When she sneaks in after he leaves, she finds an assortment of tools and equipment that could easily be mistaken for a crime scene toolkit. Though nothing definitive, the tools serve as further reminders of the life Marco left behind, or so she hopes. As she stares at the array of items, memories flood her mind. Moments of love, laughter, and intimacy shared with Marco. The thought of him being capable of violence feels impossible, yet the evidence keeps piling up, leaving her caught between love and duty. Eliza's investigation brings her closer to her goal, but also drives a wedge between her and Marco. She realizes that her emotions are becoming increasingly conflicted. On one hand, her instincts as a detective push her to pursue the truth, but her heart urges her to protect her family. The struggle between her two identities, wife and detective, becomes unbearable, leaving her emotionally drained and distant. Marco senses her withdrawal and grows increasingly worried that he's losing her. His fear manifests as an intense possessiveness. He tries to control the situation, attempting to keep Eliza close while hiding his secrets. During a tense dinner conversation, Marco's frustration boils over, and he confronts Eliza about her suspicious behavior. Eliza, caught off guard, stammers, unable to come up with a convincing excuse. This confrontation leads to a chilling silence between them. Marco retreats into his thoughts, grappling with the idea of confessing his past in hopes of salvaging their relationship. Yet he knows that any hint of his truth would only confirm Eliza's worst fears. For now, he decides that the best way to protect his family is to maintain his facade, but this decision only intensifies his inner turmoil. Eliza, exhausted by her inner battle, makes a choice. She decides to confront Marco directly, hoping that he'll finally come clean. She prepares herself for the worst, struggling to imagine what he might reveal. Her resolve is strong, but her heart aches at the possibility of losing him if her suspicions are confirmed. When Marco returns home that evening, Eliza finally confronts him, her voice trembling as she asks about his past. At first, Marco deflects her questions, trying to downplay her concerns. But as Eliza presses him, demanding honesty, Marco realizes he's trapped. With no other option, he reluctantly opens up, sharing fragments of his childhood, a tale of darkness and survival under his father's shadow. Marco's confession is heart-wrenching. He recounts the abuse, the fear, and the isolation he endured, revealing the scars that shaped him into the man he is today. He explains that he has tried to suppress this darkness, hoping to build a new life with Eliza and their daughter, free from the horrors of his past. Eliza listens in silence, her heart breaking for the pain Marco endured, but her doubts still linger. Despite his confession, Eliza's mind remains plagued by one question. Has Marco truly left his past behind, or does that darkness still live within him? After Marco's confession, a fragile truce settles between him and Eliza. Marco hopes that revealing some of his past has alleviated Eliza's suspicions, but her detective instincts still hum beneath the surface. She can't shake the feeling that there's more to the story, and every time Marco falters, she notices. Determined to uncover more, Eliza intensifies her investigation, discreetly interviewing old contacts from Marco's hometown and combing through police files related to his family. The more she digs, the more she realizes how terrifyingly intricate his past is. While Marco has tried to convince her that he left his father's world behind, the evidence seems to tell a different story. Meanwhile, Marco becomes increasingly paranoid, sensing that Eliza is drifting further away with each passing day. He becomes more desperate to shield his family from the truth, even if that means telling more lies. But the weight of his deception is beginning to wear on him, and he starts to question whether he can keep it up. Their daughter, sensing the growing tension, clings to them both, providing brief moments of warmth and happiness that highlight everything they stand to lose. Marco and Eliza try to hold their family together, but the cracks in their foundation deepen, making it clear that one more revelation could shatter everything. Eliza's investigation leads her to a former detective named Officer Garza, who handled the case of Marco's father. He recalls the young Marco as an intelligent but troubled child, caught in a dark family environment. Garza reveals details that Marco never shared with Eliza, information about violent incidents and Marco's deep involvement in his father's life before he escaped. These revelations shake Eliza to her core. She begins to wonder if Marco's darkness isn't just a product of his upbringing but an inherent part of him. Officer Garza warns her, subtly implying that people like Marco can never fully escape their past. When Eliza returns home, Marco notices her shaken state and grows increasingly worried. Despite his fears, he asks her directly if her work has revealed anything about him. The tension in the room is palpable as she hesitates, but Eliza ultimately chooses silence over confrontation, unsure of how much of her suspicions she's ready to voice. That night, Eliza watches Marco as he sleeps, torn between the man she loves and the man she fears he might be. Her mind flashes back to moments when he seemed oddly calm under stress, and she wonders if it's a byproduct of trauma or something more sinister. The betrayal she feels is deepening, but she isn't ready to confront him just yet. Instead, she decides to bide her time, hoping that more information will lead her to the truth. The pressure mounts, and Marco's paranoia becomes nearly unbearable. Desperate to protect his family, he decides to take matters into his own hands, vowing to stop Eliza's investigation before she uncovers the worst of his secrets. He begins subtly manipulating situations, hiding documents, and planting red herrings to mislead her. One evening, as they sit together on the couch, Marco confesses more about his relationship with his father. He explains the inner conflict he's faced his entire life, torn between wanting to be a better person and fearing he'll fall into the same patterns. Eliza listens intently, feeling his pain but unable to dismiss her own suspicions. She's haunted by the fear that Marco's struggle with his inner darkness isn't just a passing phase, but a permanent part of who he is. Later that night, Eliza confronts Marco about his mysterious behavior. She asks him directly if he's hiding anything else from her, but Marco deflects her questions, becoming defensive. The argument escalates, leaving Eliza feeling even more isolated. The emotional toll of their strained relationship is palpable, and she begins to wonder if love alone is enough to overcome the growing chasm between them. Meanwhile, Marco feels his world spiraling out of control. He knows Eliza is getting closer to the truth, and his desperation drives him to make a dangerous decision. He decides to cut off anyone from his past who might reveal his secrets to Eliza, isolating her from further information in an attempt to protect what's left of their relationship. This choice marks a turning point for Marco, as he veers closer to the darkness he's tried so hard to avoid. In Chapter 16, Eliza's persistence pays off when she uncovers a hidden police report that provides damning details about Marco's involvement in one of his father's crimes. Though the evidence is circumstantial, it paints a picture of a young man who, while not an active participant, certainly knew more than he's admitted. Eliza confronts Marco with the report, forcing him to face the reality of his past. Marco is visibly shaken, and he finally breaks down, confessing to everything he remembers from that night. He admits that he was aware of his father's crimes, but insists that he never actively participated. However, Eliza struggles to reconcile this new information with the man she thought she knew. In a moment of raw vulnerability, Marco begs for her understanding, pleading with her to see the good in him. He admits that he's terrified of losing her and their daughter, but Eliza remains uncertain. Her heart aches, but her loyalty to her job and her principles prevents her from fully forgiving him. The emotional distance between them grows wider as Eliza wrestles with her decision. She contemplates whether their love can withstand the weight of Marco's past, or if it's time to walk away for the sake of her own sanity. Marco, meanwhile, realizes he's reached a point of no return. Either he confronts his demons fully or risks losing the life he's built with Eliza. Their relationship hangs by a thread, and as the chapter closes, both Marco and Eliza are left to grapple with the consequences of their choices. They stand on the edge of a precipice, unsure if they can find their way back to each other or if their love is destined to be a casualty of the secrets that haunt them. In the wake of their confrontation, Eliza finds herself struggling with the weight of Marco's confessions. The reality of his past looms like a dark cloud over their lives, transforming her perspective on every shared memory and moment between them. Eliza tries to keep up appearances for their daughter's sake, but she can't shake the lingering doubts about Marco's true nature. Meanwhile, Marco wrestles with the fear that Eliza's perception of him has shifted irrevocably. In an attempt to reassure her, he pours his energy into being the perfect husband and father, hoping to prove his commitment to their family. But this effort only deepens Eliza's inner conflict, as she feels increasingly trapped between the man she loves and the man she fears. Seeking clarity, Eliza turns to her friend and mentor, Officer Morales, for guidance. Morales, who has always been a steadfast supporter, encourages her to confront her emotions directly. He advises her to trust her instincts and reminds her that love and loyalty can coexist with a commitment to the truth. As Eliza contemplates her next move, Marco's paranoia resurfaces. Sensing that Eliza might be getting closer to the darker corners of his past, he becomes increasingly anxious, fearing that she may eventually report him. The couple's interactions become strained, and their home, once a sanctuary, feels like a battleground. Marco's paranoia drives him to take drastic measures, further concealing evidence of his past. He's constantly on edge, unable to escape the feeling that everything he's built is about to crumble. As he becomes more reclusive, he starts spending long hours in his workshop, obsessively working on projects to keep his mind occupied. Eliza, aware of Marco's strange behavior, grows more suspicious. She starts noticing inconsistencies in his actions and mannerisms, catching him in small lies that chip away at her trust. One day, as she watches him from a distance, she realizes that Marco has become a stranger to her, a man with secrets and scars she can't begin to understand. The tension escalates when Eliza stumbles upon an old letter hidden in one of Marco's belongings. The letter, written by his father, contains cryptic references to events Marco has never mentioned. The words hint at a bond between father and son that went beyond mere blood ties, a shared understanding of their family's dark legacy. Disturbed by the letter's implications, Eliza confronts Marco once more. This time, Marco is cornered. He's forced to admit that he once struggled with the same darkness that consumed his father, and that he's been hiding it from her out of shame and fear. Marco's admission shakes Eliza to her core. She's torn between her love for him and the realization that he may never fully escape the shadows of his past. After the intense confrontation, Marco is left shattered, haunted by the fear of losing Eliza. Desperate to keep her in his life, he makes the decision to confront his demons head-on. He reaches out to an old acquaintance, a therapist who specializes in trauma and psychological disorders, hoping to finally address the darkness within him. Eliza, meanwhile, is consumed by doubt. She grapples with the knowledge that Marco is actively seeking help, but wonders if his efforts are enough to save their relationship. She finds herself at a crossroads, questioning whether her love for him can outweigh the fear that his past will come back to haunt them. While Marco attends his therapy sessions, Eliza continues her investigation into his past, determined to understand the full extent of his secrets. Her search leads her to a small town where Marco once lived with his family. There, she meets people who knew Marco as a child, people who remember him as a quiet, troubled boy overshadowed by his father's reputation. One elderly woman shares a particularly chilling memory of Marco's father, recounting a night when Marco was seen covered in blood after a violent altercation. The story sends a chill down Eliza's spine, and she begins to question whether Marco's darkness is a product of his environment or something deeper, something intrinsic. Marco and Eliza reach the breaking point in their relationship. The strain of his secrets and her suspicions has taken an irreparable toll on their trust. Marco's therapy sessions have helped him understand his trauma, but he realizes that no amount of healing can erase the fear in Eliza's eyes. One evening, Marco gathers the courage to have an honest conversation with Eliza. He opens up about his struggles, admitting that he's terrified of becoming like his father. He confesses that he's never fully dealt with the trauma of his childhood, and that the fear of hurting those he loves has been a constant shadow in his life. Eliza listens, her heart torn between empathy and fear. She realizes that Marco's vulnerability is genuine, but the depth of his trauma makes her question whether she can truly be safe with him. She confesses her own fears, telling him that she doesn't know if she can ever fully trust him again. The conversation leaves them both emotionally drained. Marco offers to leave if that's what Eliza needs to feel safe, but Eliza hesitates. Despite everything, she still loves him, and the thought of losing him is unbearable. They agree to take a step back, giving each other space to process their emotions. Marco and Eliza are left in a painful limbo, unsure if their love is strong enough to withstand the weight of Marco's past. Their once stable relationship now hangs by a thread, and the future is uncertain. Both are forced to confront the possibility that their love may not be enough to conquer the darkness that threatens to consume them. After their heart-wrenching conversation, Marco and Eliza attempt to give each other space, but the silence between them only intensifies the pain. Eliza's heart is divided. She still loves Marco deeply, but can't ignore the troubling shadows of his past. In her search for clarity, she begins confiding in her close friend, Officer Morales, who, while sympathetic, suggests she consider the weight of the secrets Marco has withheld from her. Morales, however, believes there is more to Marco's story than what's on the surface and encourages her to keep investigating to find the truth for herself. Meanwhile, Marco is left alone with his guilt and unresolved trauma. He throws himself into work and therapy, determined to confront his past once and for all. Marco's therapist urges him to recount painful memories from his childhood, which dredges up haunting images of his father's violent tendencies and the fear he experienced growing up. Marco realizes that he has spent his entire life running from his father's shadow, trying desperately to become a different man. Yet, each step has only made him feel further entrenched in the same darkness. One night, Eliza discovers a box hidden deep in their attic, filled with remnants of Marco's childhood, drawings, letters, and photographs. Among them, she finds a picture of Marco as a young boy, clutching his mother's hand, his expression somber and haunted. There's also a note, written in his mother's handwriting with a single line, "You are not your father, Marco." The words resonate deeply with Eliza, stirring a faint glimmer of hope that perhaps Marco is indeed capable of change. With the newfound understanding that Marco has been fighting his own demons, Eliza decides to confront her husband once more, this time without accusation, but with compassion. She expresses her desire to understand his past fully, assuring him that she wants to support him, but needs to know everything if they are to rebuild their trust. Reluctantly, Marco opens up, recounting the most harrowing moments of his childhood. He reveals the terror of living under a father who was both abusive and feared by the town, and how he witnessed things that no child should ever see. Marco's mother, gentle but powerless against his father, became his only safe haven. He admits to Eliza that he has always felt like a ticking time bomb, worried that he might one day become the man he despised. Eliza listens, her heart breaking as she realizes the depth of Marco's internal struggles. She holds his hand, telling him that while she cannot erase his past, she believes he has the strength to choose his own path. Her words provide Marco with a much-needed sense of redemption, a small but powerful light in the darkness that has haunted him. For the first time, Marco begins to feel hopeful. He is no longer facing his fears alone. He has someone by his side who sees both his flaws and his humanity. The couple shares an intimate moment, reigniting the love that had been clouded by secrets and fear. As Marco and Eliza work towards healing, trouble lurks on the horizon. Officer Morales, who has been secretly investigating Marco's past, stumbles upon an old, unsolved crime that seems eerily connected to Marco's family. The crime involves the suspicious death of a man who had a long-standing rivalry with Marco's father. The case had been closed as an accident, but the details are unsettling, hinting at foul play. Morales, conflicted and concerned for Eliza's safety, decides to confront her with his findings. He informs her of the possible link between Marco's family and the unsolved crime, warning her that there may be more to Marco's darkness than she realizes. Shocked and disoriented, Eliza feels the ground beneath her shift once again. She had started to believe in Marco's redemption, but the revelation throws her into a whirlwind of doubt. Unsure of how to process this new information, Eliza decides not to confront Marco immediately. Instead, she quietly investigates, combing through darkness. One night, Eliza discovers a box hidden deep in their attic, filled with remnants of Marco's childhood, drawings, letters, and photographs. Among them, she finds a picture of Marco as a young boy, clutching his mother's hand, his expression somber and haunted. There's also a note, written in his mother's handwriting with a single line, "You are not your father, Marco." The words resonate deeply with Eliza, stirring a faint glimmer of hope that perhaps Marco is indeed capable of change. With the newfound understanding that Marco has been fighting his own demons, Eliza decides to confront her husband once more, this time without accusation, but with compassion. She expresses her desire to understand his past fully, assuring him that she wants to support him, but needs to know everything if they are to rebuild their trust. Reluctantly, Marco opens up, recounting the most harrowing moments of his childhood. He reveals the terror of living under a father who was both abusive and feared by the town, and how he witnessed things that no child should ever see. Marco's mother, gentle but powerless against his father, became his only safe haven. He admits to Eliza that he has always felt like a ticking time bomb, worried that he might one day become the man he despised. Eliza listens, her heart breaking as she realizes the depth of Marco's internal struggles. She holds his hand, telling him that while she cannot erase his past, she believes he has the strength to choose his own path. Her words provide Marco with a much-needed sense of redemption, a small but powerful light in the darkness that has haunted him. For the first time, Marco begins to feel hopeful. He is no longer facing his fears alone. He has someone by his side who sees both his flaws and his humanity. The couple shares an intimate moment, reigniting the love that had been clouded by secrets and fear. As Marco and Eliza work towards healing, trouble lurks on the horizon. Officer Morales, who has been secretly investigating Marco's past, stumbles upon an old, unsolved crime that seems eerily connected to Marco's family. The crime involves the suspicious death of a man who had a long-standing rivalry with Marco's father. The case had been closed as an accident, but the details are unsettling, hinting at foul play. Morales, conflicted and concerned for Eliza's safety, decides to confront her with his findings. He informs her of the possible link between Marco's family and the unsolved crime, warning her that there may be more to Marco's darkness than she realizes. Shocked and disoriented, Eliza feels the ground beneath her shift once again. She had started to believe in Marco's redemption, but the revelation throws her into a whirlwind of doubt. Unsure of how to process this new information, Eliza decides not to confront Marco immediately. Instead, she quietly investigates, combing through public records and revisiting the old town Marco grew up in, hoping to find answers. Her search leads her to an old neighbor who remembers the day of the mysterious death, recounting how Marco's father had been seen arguing with the man shortly before his demise. The witness hints that Marco, then a young boy, may have been present during the altercation. Eliza returns home, her mind racing. She's torn between the love she feels for Marco and the possibility that he's been hiding even darker secrets. Her inner turmoil is visible, and Marco notices her growing distance. He begins to suspect that something is wrong and fears that he might lose her again. The tension between Marco and Eliza reaches its boiling point. Unable to bear the weight of the secrets she's discovered, Eliza finally confronts Marco about the unsolved crime and his father's role in it. She asks him if he had any involvement or knowledge of the incident, and if he has been hiding even more from her. Marco, feeling cornered and betrayed, is furious that Eliza went behind his back, but he understands her need for answers. He admits that he was present the night of the altercation between his father and the man, but insists he had no involvement in the man's death. Marco reveals that he saw his father commit the crime but was forced to stay silent, as his father had threatened him if he ever spoke of it. The trauma of witnessing such a violent act had scarred him deeply, and he confesses that he has spent his life fearing that he might inherit his father's darkness. Eliza is devastated, yet her heart aches for Marco. She realizes that his secrecy wasn't born out of malice, but out of a deep-seated fear. Marco, raw and vulnerable, tells her that he has lived his entire life trying to bury the horrors of his past, and that meeting her was the only thing that made him feel human again. He begs her to believe in his redemption, to see him as the man he has worked so hard to become. After a long silence, Eliza embraces him, her love overpowering her doubts. She assures him that while the journey won't be easy, she's willing to stand by his side. They agree to rebuild their trust from the ground up, promising to be honest with each other moving forward. However, both are acutely aware that their love will continue to be tested. Marco's past may be buried, but the scars it left are far from healed. Eliza knows that her commitment to Marco will require strength and resilience, but she chooses to believe in the goodness she sees within him. Marco, deeply grateful for her forgiveness, vows to never let his past define him again. On a bittersweet note, with Marco and Eliza clinging to each other, determined to face whatever comes next. They have survived the revelations, but the shadows of the past still linger, casting uncertainty on their future. In the aftermath of Marco's heartbreaking confession, He and Eliza make a pact to leave no more secrets between them. Yet, just as they begin to rebuild their fractured bond, a new threat looms on the horizon. Marco's past has once again reared its head in a way he never anticipated, bringing with it people and events he believed he had left far behind. One evening, Eliza receives an anonymous letter filled with veiled threats against Marco, warning her that Marco's past is far darker than she could imagine. It hints at secrets Marco might not even be aware of, as well as possible crimes his father may have committed, implicating Marco's family in a vast network of corruption and violence. Eliza, despite her fear, hides the letter from Marco, hoping to investigate on her own before bringing more pain into his life. Determined to protect Marco, Eliza reaches out to Officer Morales, who has continued to dig deeper into Marco's father's connections. Together, they uncover files linking Marco's father to a web of illegal activities, spanning from organized crime to political corruption. They find records of Marco's father using various aliases and working with figures who wield immense power in the shadows. Morales warns Eliza that such individuals might see Marco as a threat, suspecting he knows too much or might someday expose them. Meanwhile, Marco senses Eliza's increasing tension and fears she is once again distancing herself. His anxieties resurface, feeding his insecurities that perhaps Eliza will never fully accept his past. Torn between confronting her and respecting her space, Marco decides to wait, hoping she'll confide in him when she's ready. Unable to bear the weight of her discovery alone, Eliza confides in Marco. She shows him the letter, and they pore over its contents together, each line dripping with implications and fear. The threat of Marco's past, once a mere shadow, now feels like a dark, looming storm. Marco realizes that his attempt to live a quiet, redeemed life might be impossible unless he finally confronts the ghosts that haunt him. With Eliza by his side, Marco decides to return to his hometown, the place where he witnessed the worst of his father's actions, in the hopes of unearthing the truth once and for all. They visit old acquaintances of Marco's father, piecing together fragments of information that paint a vivid picture of a man who was both feared and revered. Their investigation leads them to a woman named Rosa, one of Marco's father's former associates. Rosa remembers Marco's father well, recalling a man whose ambition was ruthless and whose actions left a trail of despair. She speaks of a time when Marco's father took someone's life in cold blood, with Marco present, watching. Rosa's words stir a traumatic memory Marco had long buried, one that reveals just how deeply he was affected by his father's violence. That night, the memories come flooding back in Marco's dreams, a surreal and haunting blend of blood, screams, and his father's cold, relentless gaze. He wakes up in a cold sweat, with Eliza by his side, holding his hand. She whispers soothing words to him, grounding him in the present, reminding him that he is no longer under his father's control. Her presence reassures him, and for the first time, Marco feels a glimmer of hope, a feeling that perhaps he truly can break free from his past. Just as Marco and Eliza's bond strengthens, the threats against them escalate. Mysterious individuals begin appearing around their home, watching from a distance, their faces obscured. Their home feels less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. Marco realizes that if he truly wants a fresh start with Eliza, he must confront those who hold power over his father's legacy, even if it means putting himself in harm's way. As they delve deeper, Marco uncovers a revelation that shakes him to his core. His father's criminal network still operates in the shadows, controlled by powerful figures who believe Marco is a threat to their existence. These individuals have been tracking Marco's movements, believing that he may be trying to expose their operations. Eliza, steadfast and courageous, insists on standing by Marco's side, even as he urges her to leave for her own safety. She reminds him that they're in this together, that she's willing to face whatever danger lies ahead as long as they are together. They decide to confront the leader of the network, a man named Anton, who was once his father's closest ally and confidant. Anton is known for his merciless nature, someone who views threats with a chilling efficiency. Marco and Eliza track him down to an abandoned warehouse, where Anton waits for them with a calm, almost bored demeanor, as though their arrival had been long anticipated. In their tense confrontation, Anton reveals that he always saw potential in Marco and once hoped to recruit him into the family's business. However, seeing Marco's rejection of his father's legacy, Anton issues a final warning: leave town and never look back, or risk suffering the same fate as his father. Marco, standing his ground, tells Anton that he will never succumb to the path his father took and that he will do everything in his power to protect Eliza and their future. Determined to escape the chains of his past, Marco decides to take drastic measures. He reaches out to Officer Morales, explaining everything he knows about his father's criminal network. Morales agrees to help, though he warns that taking down such a powerful organization will be no small feat and could expose them to further danger. As Morales and his team build their case, Marco and Eliza find themselves caught in a race against time. Anton, sensing that Marco may betray them to the authorities, sends his men too. That night, the memories come flooding back in Marco's dreams, a surreal and haunting blend of blood, screams, and his father's cold, relentless gaze. He wakes up in a cold sweat, with Eliza by his side, holding his hand. She whispers soothing words to him, grounding him in the present, reminding him that he is no longer under his father's control. Her presence reassures him, and for the first time, Marco feels a glimmer of hope, a feeling that perhaps he truly can break free from his past. Just as Marco and Eliza's bond strengthens, the threats against them escalate. Mysterious individuals begin appearing around their home, watching from a distance, their faces obscured. Their home feels less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. Marco realizes that if he truly wants a fresh start with Eliza, he must confront those who hold power over his father's legacy, even if it means putting himself in harm's way. As they delve deeper, Marco uncovers a revelation that shakes him to his core. His father's criminal network still operates in the shadows, controlled by powerful figures who believe Marco is a threat to their existence. These individuals have been tracking Marco's movements, believing that he may be trying to expose their operations. Eliza, steadfast and courageous, insists on standing by Marco's side, even as he urges her to leave for her own safety. She reminds him that they're in this together, that she's willing to face whatever danger lies ahead as long as they are together. They decide to confront the leader of the network, a man named Anton, who was once his father's closest ally and confidant. Anton is known for his merciless nature, someone who views threats with a chilling efficiency. Marco and Eliza track him down to an abandoned warehouse, where Anton waits for them with a calm, almost bored demeanor, as though their arrival had been long anticipated. In their tense confrontation, Anton reveals that he always saw potential in Marco and once hoped to recruit him into the family's business. However, seeing Marco's rejection of his father's legacy, Anton issues a final warning: leave town and never look back, or risk suffering the same fate as his father. Marco, standing his ground, tells Anton that he will never succumb to the path his father took and that he will do everything in his power to protect Eliza and their future. Determined to escape the chains of his past, Marco decides to take drastic measures. He reaches out to Officer Morales, explaining everything he knows about his father's criminal network. Morales agrees to help, though he warns that taking down such a powerful organization will be no small feat and could expose them to further danger. As Morales and his team build their case, Marco and Eliza find themselves caught in a race against time. Anton, sensing that Marco may betray them to the authorities, sends his men to intimidate them. One night, their home is broken into, and Marco and Eliza narrowly escape a deadly confrontation. It's a turning point for Marco. He realizes he can't allow this danger to follow them forever. Together, Marco and Eliza decide to disappear. They pack their belongings, leaving behind their home, friends, and everything familiar to them. It's a painful decision, but they know it's the only way to truly start anew. Before they leave, Marco leaves a message with Morales, informing him of their intentions and encouraging him to press forward with the investigation to dismantle the organization once and for all. As they drive away from the life they once knew, Marco and Eliza feel a bittersweet mixture of sorrow and hope. They are leaving behind the shadows of the past, but their love, forged in the crucible of hardship and resilience, feels stronger than ever. Marco glances at Eliza, his heart filled with gratitude for her unwavering faith in him. She smiles back, knowing that while their journey is far from over, they are finally free together. After making the painful decision to leave behind their previous life, Marco and Eliza find themselves in a remote town where anonymity is their shield. They rent a modest cottage tucked away on the outskirts, surrounded by trees and mountains, a world away from the dangerous webs of Marco's past. It's a sanctuary, and for the first time in months, they begin to experience a life free from fear. Their days settle into a rhythm of quiet domesticity, with Marco taking up work as a handyman, while Eliza continues her investigative work remotely, using her skills to assist Morales in exposing the criminal organization without drawing attention to their whereabouts. Though the danger is still out there, each day brings them closer to the future they've dreamed of, a life where Marco's dark past no longer defines him. Yet, the tranquility is marred by a lingering unease. Despite his love for Eliza and the peace they've found, Marco feels the weight of unresolved guilt. He grapples with the feeling that he's left Morales to fight alone, as well as a nagging worry that Anton may still be watching, biding his time for a moment to strike. Eliza, noticing Marco's inner turmoil, encourages him to confide in her. She listens as Marco expresses his doubts and regrets, reassuring him that his journey to redemption does not hinge on grand gestures, but on the life he chooses to build with her. Just as they begin to find closure, a message arrives, a warning from Morales that Anton's men may have tracked them down. Morales advises caution, fearing for their safety but unsure how close the threat truly is. Marco and Eliza make the painful decision to relocate once more, refusing to allow fear to dictate their lives. As they pack their belongings, Eliza reminds Marco that no matter where they go, they'll always have each other. Despite the fresh start they find in a new location, Marco knows deep down that Anton's shadow still looms. Driven by a need to finally sever ties with the past, Marco takes a calculated risk. He agrees to meet with Anton for one last confrontation, a chance to lay everything on the table and demand that he leave Marco and Eliza in peace. Eliza supports his decision, knowing it's the only way for them to truly move forward. In an abandoned warehouse late one night, Marco and Anton face each other. Anton, cool and collected, exudes the same ruthless energy Marco remembers from his father. He makes it clear that he considers Marco a loose end, someone who could betray the organization at any moment. But Marco, no longer intimidated, stands firm. He asserts his desire for a clean break, stating that he wants nothing to do with Anton's world or his father's legacy. Anton listens with a smirk, amused by Marco's resolve. He offers a deal. If Marco can walk away without ever looking back, Anton will allow it. But should Marco ever interfere or speak out about what he knows, the consequences will be severe. It's a deal Marco is willing to accept, and he gives Anton his word that he wants nothing more than a life of peace with Eliza. They shake hands, and as Marco walks away, he feels a weight lift from his shoulders, as though the past has finally released its grip on him. Returning to Eliza, Marco recounts the confrontation, relieved that they can now live without fear. Together, they settle into their new life, vowing to cherish every moment of freedom they have fought so hard to secure. Their journey has been one of love, trust, and resilience, and as they move forward, they do so with the knowledge that they have overcome every challenge together. Marco and Eliza are seen embracing on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset. Their lives, once entangled in darkness, have found the light. The story closes with them standing hand in hand, united against any storm that may come, determined to protect the love they've nurtured through every trial. They are no longer defined by the shadows of the past, but by the hope and strength that their love has brought them. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.